Do things in your life run together in an endless stream resulting in anxiety? Where it's like one long story that never ends, where anxiety of the last chapter carries over to the next chapter. Well, I invite you to join my experiment with Celtic thresholding for the purpose of relieving anxiety. I will teach you what Celtic thresholding is. I will show you how I am implementing it myself in my personal life, and how to create your own Celtic thresholding practice, all with the hope of relieving some anxiety. Welcome, friends. Mike Guineri here. Let's talk Celtic thresholds. Thresholds were very important to the ancient Celts in Ireland. To them, thresholds were the spaces in between, the thin times or places. To the Celts, thresholds were very potent places, both physically and mentally. To name just a few threshold practices that the Celts practiced, well, one was threshold stones. They were placed at the thresholds of sacred places. This enabled them to recognize and stop at the stones, to contemplate what it meant to cross that particular threshold. This practice was so important that even the Catholic monks set up threshold stones at their monasteries. Oh, well, did you ever notice when entering a house and smack right in front of you, seeing some sort of prayer or Irish blessing hanging on the wall? Well, this is kind of a form of thresholding. It only matters, though, if you acknowledge it and recognize the fact that you're crossing from one place to another. Another example of the Celts is the passage of time, according to the Wheel of the Year. It might not have been called the Wheel of the Year back then, but basically, the Wheel of the Year lays out specific dates that are thresholds to the Celts. For example, they are the summer and winter solstices, the vernal and autumnal equinoxes, and the halfway August 1st and Samhain on October 31st. Each one of these holidays or thresholds were very important to the Celts. They had great significance in what they represented. For example, Samhain represented the end of the final harvest of the year and the official start of the new year, the beginning of winter. It was a very spiritual time, as they believed the veil between their world and the other world was thinnest. But for sure, that day marked the end of something old and the beginning of something new. It was celebrated with feasts, rituals, and prayers. So, thresholding can be a simple but important part of one's life. It's a chance to delineate places, feelings, activities, aspects of your life, such as milestones and big decisions or turning points. But the thing is, you have to be willing to be open-minded and willing to accept or appropriately deal with what is on either side of the threshold. Here's a quote that resonates me from the book, The Soul's Slow Ripening, 12 Celtic Practices for Seeking the Sacred by Christine Paintner. Thresholds are challenging because they demand that we step into the in-between place of letting go of what has been while awaiting what is still to come. When we are able to fully release our need to control the outcome, thresholds become rich and grace places of transformation. So, what are some types of thresholds for you and me? They could be simple or complex. Well, here's a few. Doorways, different rooms. Have you ever went from one room to another room and forgot why you were there, why you went there? Happens to me all the time. There are some that believe this actually goes back to a self-preservation feature of humans from long ago. When you cross that threshold into the new room or the new area, you might not know what's on the other side. So as a self-defense mechanism, is thought that perhaps everything in your mind clears out as you cross over that threshold, including what you went to that room for. Why would our minds do this to us? Well, so we can be alert as to what might be in our new room or new space that we might have to defend ourselves. Very interesting thought. Might explain why we forget things when we go from room to room, other than the fact that we're just senile or getting old. Other types of thresholds are switching activities. Things like time, like the Celts did. day, night, weeks, months, moon cycles, whatever the measurement of time that you want to break up. Mental health. I think thresholds can be used to reduce anxiety, and I think it probably did reduce anxiety for the Celts. I don't necessarily know if it was specifically meant for that purpose, but I think it might have had that effect. Other things happen in life. Rites of passage, turning points, inflection points in your life could be a threshold. Do you ever think, why is it, at least in the past, I don't know if we do it anymore, that grooms carry brides across the threshold into their new house or apartment or whatever? That threshold is the delineation between the old life alone and their new life together. But you have to cross that threshold and recognize that threshold of what's going on. So now I'm going to give you a few examples of my personal threshold practice. Now, keep in mind, I'm brand new to this. I'm just testing it out myself. I don't know for certain that it will have any impact on my anxiety. I hope that it will, and I'm thinking positively with this. But here are some ways that I am using the practice of thresholding to hopefully reduce my anxiety. So first, I'm taking on the practice of threshold stones at the entrance to my front of my house. Now, I don't have actual stones there yet. I'm kind of trying it out first to see how the practice goes before I take the time to put stones by my front door. But what I am doing is, I have these circular columns on my porch, hold up the porch, and at the bottom of these circular columns are squares. So it looks, kind of interesting mix of shapes. So I'm making it a point whenever I leave the house to go out or when I come home, I always just stop and see these squares at the bottom. I'm always going to see them. And that's going to remind me to stop. So when I leave my house, I immediately see one of those squares or both of those squares. It stops me in my rush to remind me that I'm leaving home and entering out into the world. It reminds me not to be distracted by anything that was going inside the house, or especially inside my head. It's a chance to say to myself that I recognize all the other stuff, but I'm going to let it go for now and focus on whatever task is at hand, the reason I'm heading out and about right now. My hope is that through this practice and repetition and consistency, slowly that is exactly what will happen. I'll be able to put aside whatever was in the house, whatever's in my head, and be focused and concentrate on what I'm going out to do. I mean, has it ever happened to you that you have to leave your house to go do something? You don't have a choice, but some other things are going on in your head. You didn't finish what you were supposed to be doing at home. Whatever the case, you get in your car and you drive to whatever activity it is you have to go to. Then all of a sudden you're there or you're somewhere and you don't even remember getting there because your mind was so clogged up with whatever was going on before. You did not cross that threshold. You do not stop and say, okay, this is ending and this is starting, and deal with the implications of such. So I don't think this front door thresholding that I'm doing is going to instantly reduce my anxiety. It's not a cure. It's not like instant relief. It's called a practice for a reason, because you have to practice it and do it over and over again and get better and better at it. It's not called a Celtic cure. It's a Celtic practice. But I do see the potential in this. So, I invite you to try it along with me. And obviously, I do a similar practice in reverse when coming back into the house, with leaving anything that happened outside in the world, the drivers that aggravated me and whatever else, leave it outside. And get ready to go inside, where it's a whole different group of struggles and positives and whatever inside's going to bring. But I know that delineation point, and it reduces what's going on in my head by leaving stuff from the outside, at least for a while until I'm in the house and settled. So another example of something I'm doing as a Celtic threshold practice is in regards to my home office. Now, I've worked from home since almost 10 years now. I started in 2013. And I've always been productive and efficient, and it's never been a problem for me to work at home. However, I'm not going to lie, it has been difficult at times, causing a lot of anxiety. Because the fact is, I am at home. So even though I have my office as a separate room inside my master suite, so there's 2 doors for anyone to have to go through to get to me, there still seems to always be some sort of distraction. Usually it's my little one barging in with something, always at the worst time, always when I'm in the middle of something. So it seemed obvious to me that, this doorway is an important threshold, which crossing it causes anxiety to me. So if it's causing me anxiety, I look at it as a possibility it will relieve anxiety if it dealt with in an appropriate way. So this threshold needs to separate my home life from my work life and focusing from futzing about. So I decided to add this particular doorway to my thresholds practice. I hung a little marker on the top of the door frame. One side says focus and the other says pocus. Why? I don't know. It just rhymes. It's silly. So this little sign serves 2 purposes. One, it reminds me before going into the office that I am leaving my home and entering my work office. And stops and makes me think about that instead of just crisscrossing back and forth over this threshold without thinking about the significance of it. And it also gives me a chance to decide what the purpose of my entrance to the office is. So my little sign, the focus side, means that I'm making a conscious decision to enter the office solely for the purpose of focusing on work. I need to clear the distractions and other home stuff from my head and get down to work. The pocus side means I'm just hanging out in the office. I'm surfing the internet, doing something at my desk, who knows what. I'm just in the office hanging out. So I hope the sign will also be a helpful visual clue for my little one on whether or not to come into the office at any given time. Like I said, she has a bad habit of always coming in at the worst time, but she can at least look at this little sign and say, oh, Dad's busy focusing, or, haha, funny pocus, I can go in and bother Dad. So if I decide I'm going to cross the threshold into the office to focus, I say to myself that I acknowledge that I'm entering a focused work. Anything else with home or the family is left outside the door and will just have to wait until I return to be addressed. When I'm doing this, I'll usually come in and I'll meditate for a few minutes just to clear my mind and then focus on work for however long I set my intention to focus on work for when I entered the room. So I've been doing this for a little while and I think it's been helping. Once again, it's a practice, not a cure. So I'm going to keep doing this, and I have hopes that it'll have promising effects on my anxiety, and we'll see. So another threshold practice that I'm doing, which might be helpful to a lot of people out there, is the threshold between day and night. And I'm not defining day and night as sunrise and sunset. To me, night is when I'm going to sleep. Day is when I wake up. This very simple thing. So anxiety has caused me to experience really, really poor sleep. And I have a difficult time quieting my mind at night. It just keeps running and running and running. And, why? I don't know. Just lots of anxiety and stress in my head, I guess. So I decided I would try thresholding as a night and day practice measured by my bedtime and wake up time. So for my bedtime threshold, I'm trying to institute a bedtime routine, much the same way we had bedtime routines for our kids as they were growing up. I guess I need a bedtime routine too. So what I do, 10 p.m., and once again, this is easier said than done. When I say I do this, I really mean I'm trying to do this. It's difficult, and it just requires consistency and practice. So what I do is at 10 p.m. I get ready for bed. I brush my teeth. I put in my bite plate. I fill my CPAP humidifier up with water. Everything's all ready to go for bed. Now comes the most important part, the hardest part. The part that I'm going to have to fight to overcome, and that is turn off the TV. Turn it completely off. Now and right then. Don't wait till the next commercial or to the end of the scene. Just turn it off. Then I try to do a little bedtime pep talk for myself and say something like, hey, the day is over. It's time to rest. I have to rest. There's nothing I can do about the past day or the day to come while I'm resting. It's time to peacefully wind down and let my body rest into sleep. In the balance of the time between then and 11 p.m., I'll read a fiction book or something fun, nothing too deep or too academic or anything like that. Or if I don't feel like reading, I'll listen to a bedtime story on the Calm app. There's a lot of pretty cool stories on there, narrated by all different people, actors and actresses and musicians. But when I do decide to read, it's on an e-ink screen, kind of like a Kindle. No backlit devices, no blue screen devices, nothing like that. So once it hits at 11 o'clock, off the lights, put on my CPAP mask, and close my eyes. If I still feel like sleep may be difficult, I'll put on the Softly Back to Sleep meditation on the Calm app. I like that one a lot, and it's narrated by Jerome Flynn. But the most important part of this thresholding practice at bedtime is to clearly recognize the delineation between night sleep and day activities and what they each represent. So once again, it's a practice. I'm hopeful that it'll work. If not relieving my anxiety, at least maybe letting me get some better sleep. But I'm hoping for both. I do believe that they are very related. So lastly, I'm going to share with you a couple of examples of mental health thresholding I did recently. Now, these aren't exactly practices. I guess you could say the concept of what I did in these examples was thresholding, but I did it as it came up. It wasn't a regular thing. So here's the first example. I have spinal stenosis that I was diagnosed with back in December. It's been extremely painful to me since August, and it's caused me a lot of anxiety and depression. Now, there's nothing I can do to cure it short of surgery. I'm on treatments with medication, physical therapy, and just recently got an epidural injection, which I'm hoping will help. But the fact is, this is still a difficult condition to deal with. So I'm recognizing this spinal stenosis as a threshold in my life. There's the before spinal stenosis and the after. So in this in between these two places, I have to accept that some things in my life will change. And that if I accept that, there are ways and things I can do to compensate for it. I have to accept that there are some things I just can no longer do. So now whenever I experience anxiety or depression from the spinal stenosis, I remind myself of the threshold and recognize its importance. And most of all, that I'll be okay and the future is still bright. Just because I've crossed that particular threshold is not the end of the world. I just keep remembering to recognize it, saying, okay, it was like this, then something happened, and now it's like this. And as long as I understand that and remind myself of it and that it'll be okay, I'm hoping that will relieve some anxiety. So another example of thresholding that I recently did with regard to more mental-like issues is related to you guys, the people watching this video. So I'm not a person who's usually out there recording myself in videos, putting myself out on YouTube, speaking in public, or anything like that. So in trying to make the best product for you, the most helpful and useful videos, I have to obviously listen back to the videos after I record them and edit them to clean them up and make them nice. But it quickly became extremely clear to me that I speak pretty poorly. Not the content, just the elocution. And And maybe it's sometimes difficult to understand me on these videos. Maybe I slur my words sometimes a little bit. And I can chalk it up a bit to my thick New York accent, and being very nervous, which I am. Definitely doesn't help with having nerves and anxiety. So even with that, my real issue is my enunciation. I need to speak clearer and stop slurring my words. And regardless of how nervous I am when I record, I have to slow down and get the words out understandable. I think my problem is my mind is going much faster than I can speak, and that results in my slurring and poor enunciation. So to me, this is a major threshold that, just came into my field of view, which kind of causes me some anxiety and depression, because I want to do a good job for you. I want you to be able to hear me and understand me clearly. And I always want to do my best. So this causes me some anxiety. So if I want to be able to communicate effectively with you and share research and ideas, I need to improve. So with this threshold in my life, a turning point, the threshold behind me is my poor speaking. In front of me is a commitment to myself and the viewer that I will do better. Because in this threshold, I'm recognizing this problem. I'm acknowledging its existence, that there's a prior to it, an after to it, and what it means to be in that middle of it, and how things are going to change. So I'm taking action and working on this. I'm trying to be much more cognizant of my speech when I'm talking to you. I've been looking up some online tutorials on better enunciating and elocution with videos, taking action on it, instead of just being stressed out and having anxiety from it. So now, prior to starting to record a video like this one, I remind myself of this threshold and actively try to do better using the tools I am learning. So, I invite you to give Celtic thresholding a try and join me in testing the practice as an anxiety-relieving tool. You're welcome to try my practices or even make your own. If you want to make your own practice, I suggest you take these steps. First, identify an anxiety-causing issue to you. If the purpose of this Celtic thresholding is to relieve anxiety, you have to find an issue that causes you anxiety. Next, identify a threshold related to this issue. And that's pretty self-explanatory. Crossing some line, in the visible line in the sand, is taking you from less anxiety to more, or none to some. Whatever the case may be, identify the threshold that goes with that particular anxiety. Ask yourself, why is this threshold important? What positive impact could identifying this threshold as you approach it have? Knowing that it's there in front of you. How will you recognize this threshold when you see it, or when you come to it? Then ask yourself, how will I address this threshold? And then, how will I honor it upon encountering it? Obviously, crossing the threshold, something is changing, so you need to address how you're going to deal with it. And that's what I mean about how you'll address the threshold. And when I say how I honor it upon encountering it, I pretty much mean acknowledging it. Saying, hey, threshold, I see you. I know you're there. I know that you're the in-between place between a low level of anxiety that I have and this higher level of anxiety I'm going to have because I have to do whatever activity it is, for example. So design your thresholding practice that way. And then the most important thing, which I think is going to be the real secret to this thresholding practice, is you have to commit to the practice. You have to be consistent. I said it before and I'll say it again. This is not called the Celtic thresholding cure. It's a Celtic thresholding practice. And the Celts practiced all forms of thresholds throughout their life. It was an important part of their life. So much so, as I previously mentioned, that the Catholic monks adopted this practice as well. So there you have it, a brief introduction to the concept of Celtic thresholding. Thank you for watching and exploring this practice with me. If you do try thresholding, I would love to hear about your results and experiences. please feel free to leave me a comment. Also, please be sure to click on the thumbs up button on this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Also, please subscribe to my newsletter and receive a free copy of my forthcoming guide, How to Upgrade Your Mind by Living a Celtic Lifestyle. That's all, friends. See you next time.